Welcome to the Talking Transformation podcast, presented to you from the Western Cape Pod Bunker, located here in the heart of Cape Town, South Africa. This pod is presented to provide a platform and a voice for built environment professionals and interest groups who are working towards transforming the places and spaces here in South Africa. It is dedicated to those individuals and community groups that are supporting both the formal and informal processes that are shaping our cities and our spaces. In today's Talking Transformation podcast episode, we're looking at the issue of homelessness in our cities. In the third of our series of deep dive episodes looking at housing and human settlement issues, we consider the challenges faced by the homeless, the circumstances that can lead to that circumstance and eventuality, and what is being done to assist the homeless community by non-government organisations, in this case the Super Troopers organisation based here in Cape Town. Wherever in the world I've travelled in recent years, the issue of homelessness is an increasingly visible indication of personal strife, systematic challenges and socio-economic circumstances. And it's certainly not unique to South Africa. What does transformation mean for those who cannot find a place within their family home or their local neighbourhood? What does hope look and feel like, and how does that translate into options and programs for homeless community members and those interacting with them? Both Johannesburg and Cape Town in particular have seen front page and social media headlines in the various administrations' efforts to enforce bylaws in the last year or so, finding of informal traders and homeless individuals who are most likely to fall foul of those bylaws relating to streets, public spaces and the prevention of noise nuisances. Seldom do the bylaws refer to homelessness per se, instead focusing on prohibited behaviour in public spaces, such as bathing, urinating or defecating in public, consuming alcohol or drugs, starting or keeping fires, etc., etc., sleeping or camping overnight, erecting shelters. These are the typical issues that are facing those who are sleeping rough on our streets. A number of high-profile cases have also found their way into the courts and challenged through legal means. In an era of recession and failing state machinery, the need to work in collaboration and with a common purpose is fundamental to the humanity and the dignity of all our citizens, across party lines, across income groups and between communities. In today's episode, we try and understand the fundamentals, the circumstances and the challenges that prevail within homeless communities. It's a complex and frequently divisive topic. Fear, trauma, discrimination and prejudice, isolation and dislocation. These are some of the realities facing those living on our streets. On the other hand, the negative perceptions of the homeless on the neighbourhood character, amenity and environment are issues put forward by ratepayers and residents associations who claim that not enough is being done to maintain those same issues and standards. So the question is, what more can be done in partnership and what can we find consensus on? And who's leading us in these discussions? We're assisted in unpacking these issues by the founders of Cape Town's Super Troopers, a non-profit organisation staffed by both the homeless and the home-full volunteers. You'll hear more about those concepts during the conversation. Founder Kerry Hoffman tells of her personal and life-changing approach to the challenges of Cape Town's homeless community, and she's joined by our host for the discussion and fellow Super Trooper Karen Gotkin, who joined Kerry 3 years into the project. We hear about their journey, the challenges their troopers face, and their aspirations for the future. I learned a great deal talking to them, and as much as I was reminded that this is a complex issue, that there are very few easy answers or solutions, it also reaffirmed some of the basics we all seek in our life, irrespective of our circumstances, specifically dignity, respect and love. We hope you enjoy the episode and look forward to any feedback via our Twitter platform. Find us on @TalkingTransfo and the number 1. Enjoy the episode. So it's a Friday lunchtime and I'm here up in Gardens, Cape Town, and I'm with the two co-founders of Super Troopers, a homeless organisation, Kerry Hoffman and Karen Gotkin. Karen, thank you so much for hosting us this afternoon.
My pleasure.
Kerry, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Homelessness, major issue, not only in Cape Town, but across South Africa, in our urban centres, our towns and secondary cities. I was travelling in Australia over the festive period, and no surprise to those of you who work in that space to see homelessness prevalent, even in those what you would think of as first world economic leaders in terms of livability. Homelessness an issue there. Tell us about the nature of the problem. What's the extent of how many people do we estimate, and how do people find themselves in this position where they are literally living it rough on the streets? Karen, maybe you want to kick us off.
It's very difficult to give an exact figure. The city a couple of years ago said 7,500. Now they're saying closer to 5,000. But what anyone can see is if you go back a few years, the number of homeless people on the streets has increased exponentially. There are also different categories. So there's homeless people who are living in a shelter. So that's temporary accommodation. There are some people who simply come into town to look for work, go back to their homes. And then there are those who don't have anywhere to go. And typically, those are people who have fallen out with their family in one or other way, maybe because of an addiction. Very often it's because in their families they suffered abuse or harsh treatment, and actually it isn't safe for them to go back. Some of them are trying to leave the gang areas on the Cape Flats or in the townships, and the only way to do that is to remove themselves from the area, so they find their way in town. Some just had something tragic happen to them that has put them on the streets. Others have been living there for 40, 50 years. It's the only home that they know.
And from your side, Kerry, I mean, what's been described here, it's multiple reasons, complex issues, whole range of challenges that the people who find themselves in that circumstance, often coming with major issues before they even find themselves trying to find their way.
That is the reality. You know, these are hundreds, thousands of humans that end up on the street, but they're humans. There was something that happened to them, or they maybe got into circumstances. Personally, I have experiences of family members losing jobs, not having enough money to afford rent. Where do they go? If they've got a family member that they can sleep on the floor, count yourself lucky that there's that kind of support system. So we often find the diverse range of why someone is on the street. There's a world of problems. There's a world of reasons to this worldly problem.
And I'm guessing it's going to get, with the economy in the way it is nationally, and even within Cape Town, where we seem to do sometimes better in terms of the economic numbers, it's going to, the joblessness, the economic uncertainty, the likelihood is may continue.
Unless something dramatic changes, and by that I'm not referring to the economy, but I'm referring to the way homeless people are treated and accommodated in society, then the numbers are going to increase indefinitely. Because what really needs to happen is a big shift in the way people, and I mean politicians, homeowners, ratepayers associations, in the way that they view homeless people. Because what often happens is that a homeless person is not viewed as a human being. They're viewed as a problem that's cropped up in the area, much like you might have an infestation of rats or cockroaches. So they are something to be gotten rid of. So there needs to be more of a social development approach. I think an audit needs to be done of what shelters there are in Cape Town, what the conditions in those shelters are, how many beds they have, because the city has a Give Responsibly campaign, Give with Dignity, and they say don't support handouts or begging, support shelters. And that gives members of the public a level of comfort in that if they donate to shelters, they are doing their bit to solve the homeless problem.
Understood.
However, that is simply not true. The shelters have a finite number of beds and a finite capacity. They also don't allow men and women to be together. They don't allow trans people into a shelter. They don't allow families with children. So while contributing to a shelter seems like you're doing a good thing, unfortunately it is the tip of an iceberg of the problem. And actually either shelters need to be reformed completely, or there needs to be many, many more of them. Even the city safe space, which they talk a lot about, has space for 230 people. I won't even call it beds because they're not beds. There are wooden pallets on the floor, and that's what people sleep on, open to the elements. The numbers roughly of shelter beds in Cape Town is around 2,500. But already we spoke earlier about the numbers of homeless people, which the city at the moment estimate to be around 5,000, which I believe is woefully inadequate. But even there, you look at the maths, 2,500 beds, 5,000 people. So if you just tell people to donate to shelters, there's half the people on the city's own version that's not benefiting.
Kerry, I mean, what have been some of the other let's call them traditional methods of support, of where the homeless are able to find shelter? I'm thinking here of faith-based organisations. You've talked a bit about the transitional housing. What have been the traditional ways, and how are they effective or not? I take the point that the numbers are not up to scratch, but what are the different modes that have been used?
There's also that perception of, that people are choosing to be on the streets as opposed to choosing to be in shelters. But a lot of the people that we support are choosing to be on the streets because that is a safer space for them. In essence, that's where they know they're supported by other homeless people. There's a community on the streets, which is what we stepped into all these years ago. And so it's a hard situation. While there are some that have made it to shelters, there are some that made it home. Predominantly, they're still on the street.
There are certain sort of very small organizations where there are sort of micro shelters attached to a pastor or, as you say, a faith-based organization. Unfortunately, what we have seen with many of our troopers who have been to these evangelical type retreats to try and get them off the streets, it hasn't worked. That the sort of God will heal you approach alone has not stood the test of time because it's not addressing their actual reasons why they are on the streets, why they are addicted to drugs. Most of the people on the streets carry immense trauma, either from an apartheid past or from gang warfare on the Cape Flats, or from family abuse or abuse on the streets, abuse at the hand of officials. And unless you address those underlying traumas, it's not good enough to say you are God's child and God will provide.
In terms of the work that Super Troopers has been doing, let's talk about that, because when we first met last year, Karen, you told me Kerry's story, and I'm going to ask her to tell us that story now, because this was clearly something that was a sort of it seemed like an overnight moment of clarity in your mind and the change in your behaviour and what you've thrown yourself into in terms of the work of Super Troopers. So would you be so kind as to share your story of how Super Troopers came about, and then let's define what makes it different. What are you trying to achieve which is different from, well, this hasn't worked, and how are you dealing with the systemic issues which we've articulated quite well? So, Kerry, over to you.
Thank you for the opportunity to share these stories, because I think this is what it is all about. In 2014, in June, I was going through a difficult time in my own life, and this quite a big awareness just came over me in terms of being responsible for what am I going to do to help uplift myself. And so soup and sandwiches was that catalyst to simply make a pot of soup and sandwiches, ask some friends to join me, but with the intention of uplifting myself and choosing who and where I'm putting my love. I feel really blessed that in my life I've been brought up in family that has been supportive and provided unconditional love, which for me has been the catalyst or the support for me to pioneer understanding myself and my different ways in life. I didn't go through any normal kind of, when I say normal, studying and things after school, and had to figure a lot out for myself. And here came this point where I wasn't in a good space, and decided to park by the company gardens on the pavement and open my boot, put on some jazz music, and literally said good morning to whomever was waking up, walking past, or just coming into this little space. And what I felt instantly was this instant connection between humans, myself rocking up with what I had, soup and sandwiches, music, smile.
And a greeting.
And a few men, women, elderly, children just came to the space and we said good morning, and I said, would you like some soup? And they said yes, and would you like peanut butter or jam sandwiches? You know, they could choose. And it was this instant space for us to just connect, for us to socialize, not really get into deep stories about our lives, but just simply show up. And I must have engaged with about 150 people that day for about 2 hours or so. And afterwards, I realized very quickly how impacted I was by this engagement and how I could feel from their behavior or just their smile and their joy that this was something meaningful.
There was value in what you did.
There was value. And I wasn't prepared to make any promises that I couldn't keep. I wasn't prepared to do more than I could because I am quite a busy person, and it just felt like I didn't want to let these people down. I could feel that they had been in really rough circumstances, not only their living and their undignified states, but just that they'd been let down by a lot of people. So what I decided to do was just say to them, this is the date that I'll come next month, and I'll see you next month. And next month came, and I saw them, and the next month, and the next month, and there was this person rocking up once a month, that they couldn't believe really that this was all it was, just once a month, a social for them. But the crucial part of why I didn't stop was because I became very aware of the simplicity in doing something that was making such a big difference. In realizing and getting to know who these people are that I'm engaging with. Someone, a mother on her way to work that hadn't eaten, or, you know, she was cold and we had maybe a jacket that we could lend to her or give to her. And there was no charge. It was just, here you are. It was really humans showing up for each other in the most, I guess, bizarre way, which is sad. And what we're really focusing on changing is that that's not bizarre. This became our norm, where we treat each other with dignity, with love, and with respect. So this once a month social became a year and a half at the company gardens. We were at the service dining room, which allowed us to have a kitchen. It allowed us a space outside. We had movie days. We started our super salon, where the guys on the street, they gave each other haircuts. We celebrated birthdays. It was this love fest, if I can say. It was a space once a month where, whether you're homeful, living in a home, or homeless, still have a home, coming together to connect and really connect in things that bring our humanity together. So whether it was joy in the entertainment while you're going through your trauma or your loss or your loneliness, for this time you were connecting and you were seen and you were part of a bigger community. So we were at the service dining room for about a year and a half, and then moved to the carpenter shop, which is now the Hope Exchange, which is an outdoor parking lot which we literally would turn into an entertainment space. We'd have our super salon, we'd have pop-up clothing shops. Literally, these once-a-month socials became a catalyst to address the basic needs of humanity, from clothes, hair, cuts, feeling like a human, that you can be perceived as a human as well. Because the amount of people walking around, not even showered, no haircut, hasn't had, their feet addressed to, those little things are huge things.
Things that we would normally take for granted, right?
Exactly, but even deeper than that, it's like, it's just, even just the basic of human dignity should always be addressed. And then very much about providing a purpose for these guys to, instead of doing whatever crime or whatever drug or whatever alcohol or whatever destructive behavior that they would turn to because of whatever trauma or situation or circumstance they came from or had to go into for survival or the many reasons, they were choosing to come to Super Troopers, because Super Troopers was a space where they were seen, they could become purposeful, they could become productive, and they knew that I would see them next month, because we are in our 6th year. this, I would say, is one of the biggest things about Super Troopers, is that we've really invested in the personal, in the social capital on the streets. We've built relationships with people that are not seen as human, people that are just looked at, frowned upon, and just ignored. And when you're living in that space, there is no hope for you. When you're living in a space where you can be seen for where you are and what you have, and you require nothing more than just the determination to make a change for your life, then it's tickets for you.
What you're providing is the sensibility of what's in a day. What is it that I do during the course of the day? How can I assist myself, get my mental well-being? We talk a lot now, in the media is full of stories of mental health issues, and it's not just within the workplace or someone who's fortunate enough to have that work. It's here clearly an extreme environment. So can you talk a bit about that homeless and homeful approach?
I think from the very beginning, when Kerry started, she invited other people to come on the journey with her. So over the years, Super Troopers built up a loyal following of homeful volunteers. People who have a place where they can close the door, lock it, and be private from the world. I would say that that's probably the biggest distinction between homeful and homeless. Because even if you just have a room in someone's backyard, you have a place that is yours, that you can go to, that you can say, no, you may not come in. So that to me is the biggest distinction. The people living on the street have no privacy whatsoever. The huge divide is that if I'm in my house, nobody needs to know what I'm doing. Whereas if you're living out there on the street, people see, are you having an argument with your husband? Are you fighting with your children? Are you drinking? Are you taking drugs? Are you defecating? Because these are all things that humans need to do, and they don't have the privacy to do those things. So when volunteers come together with homeless people in the Super Troopers space, it proves transformative both ways. So the homeless people see that homeful people can care, and the homeful people see that homeless people are not necessarily what they are portrayed by the city, the ratepayers associations, those people who want us to be scared of them because they believe that being good to them is the worst thing that we can do.
I suppose where it gets complicated and where the challenges really start to, and the worlds of people wanting to be seen to assist, but also there's a fear factor associated. Particularly where you're seeing, you mentioned, Kerry, destructive behaviour. So somebody who's taking drugs in a public space, and you're walking with your child from your place where you live to the school, that would be a challenge. That would be, I can imagine somebody saying, this is not okay. This is not cool. Somebody who's dealing drugs on the corner to make a means and is living rough, that is not okay. So how do we mediate that massive conflict?
I'd like to answer that, because I think those examples that you've given are of people who are breaking the law. If you are breaking the law, whether it's taking drugs, stealing, breaking into a car, you must be dealt with by the police and the proper full force of the law. So to me, that's not even a grey area or anything. If that is the fact, if you're walking with your children, you see someone who's selling drugs, call the police. That's a crime. They need to be arrested. If you're walking with your children and you see some people lying, sleeping on the side of the road, that may make you feel uncomfortable, but there you don't have the right to say, take this person and move them along.
I think, for those that are walking around aimlessly on the streets that aren't really socially comfortable to be engaged by someone that maybe wants to give them something or wants to have a conversation, or, the social workers that maybe are going around speaking to homeless people and the homeless people saying, no, I don't want your help. I think in that conversation, twofold, I think it's really important to understand that there's, as Karen mentioned earlier, people are walking around, whether they have a mental health challenge or not, they can easily develop one from the amount of mistreated, I don't even know the words, but inhumane treatment by the many people out there. So number one, I feel like there's a lot of people that wouldn't want the help that's being portrayed that they're getting because they don't trust them. They've got no proof that this is something that is for them. And there's a lot of people walking around in fear because they're being addressed by fear. You know, when someone that we engage with and I see he's talking to himself, or I see he's looking depressed or has a mental health challenge or something, my love to him is given regardless of his response or his action or his anything. I can see when I'm giving something to someone that cannot say thank you or cannot be grateful or show me that, the shock that they get in being seen and felt. And that's where the transformation comes, because the next time I see him, he's going to smile at me. He's going to know that I'm safe.
It's a different connection.
It's a different connection. And so there's a lot of people walking around, whether with their children wanting to, not go by that criminal or that drug dealer or someone on drugs or someone, whatever the circumstance. If we're walking around wanting to provide, I think it's also just a standard rule in life for humanity, never mind just how to deal with people living on the streets. But if we're walking around showing compassion and showing love, for your fellow human being while they're in their state that they're in, because of reasons you've got no idea, and who are you to say or judge that circumstance or call law enforcement, because that's a grey area for me where it's being addressed in a different way. But the non-grey area is if we're dealing and treating people with love, for love, by love, there's only space to heal.
How do we start to see a cooperation and a growth of the thinking, marrying with, let's call it the governance side and the government, the state's responsibility? What's the future? Does it look different in 3 years' time than it did, for example, in 2019, when certain authorities were front page media, arguably for all the wrong reasons around the homelessness issue? How can we start to put things right and get the cooperation as opposed to an adversarial position on this homelessness issue? Any thoughts on that?
I think if you ask me and if you ask Karen, we may come up with two different points, and that's so I think that's crucial, and that's why I have Karen on my team. Because for me, certainly in the example and how I started Super Troopers and kind of been winging it for the longest time until really understanding what we could do and where are we going and should we go there. And I think the example of nearly 6 years of what we have achieved with not much, with really nothing, and with undercover, and with just getting on with connecting and transforming and sharing love and empowering, we feel hopeful that there is something that we can do, and there is a future. And the more we can, the more you act on things and the less talk and more action. And we've certainly done the action, and now it's really time. And we've certainly, the reputation of Super Troopers, we've got a good reputation, and it's certainly time for us to come out loud and collaborate and form partnerships, which is what we're doing. And so it's less about, I've always focused on what we're doing as opposed to educating out there, as opposed to, this is a global problem. And in order to change the world, you change your own world. And so that it was the choice nearly 6 years ago. And so it has rippled. And so I feel incredibly hopeful about our future, because I'm seeing more people stepping up, showing up, giving of themselves in ways that are impactful and making tangible change. And while this is a global problem, we do intend for this to be on a global level, building global partnerships, relationships. And, with every problem, my mother, bless her heart and soul, taught me everything I know. One of the quotes I was brought up with was, "There are no problems, only solutions." And when you live in a way where you're solution orientated, and when you live in a way that is filled with love, that is transformational in itself. So the future, in terms of Super Troopers, I see it as hopeful. I feel like we wouldn't have come this far if we were only going this far.
So the short answer is that unless there's a political will to change the dynamic, nothing will change. The current party in control of local government has very publicly announced that they are moving away from a social development approach into a law enforcement approach. And we can see that by what's going on. The problem with that is that there is such a deep distrust of the city from people on the street, because they know that at any second law enforcement can come and interfere with them, either through a proper bylaw enforcement, but more often than not, it's simply to harass them, belittle them. There are a lot of gay people on the street because, if we go back to the very beginning, when we were talking about reasons families reject people, a hugely disproportionate number of gay and trans people on the street compared to in the general population, because they are very discriminated against.
Stigmatized, etc.
Yes. Often, law enforcement officers will go and, you bloody moffy, and it's dehumanizing. Unless there is a real will on the part of the powers that be to encourage sensitivity in their officers, to train them in diversity and what not to say to a person, there will always be a standoff between the city on the one hand and homeless people on the other because of this distrust. And I think that that's a huge thing that Kerry brought onto the streets in 2014, was this idea that there is someone that you can trust. Because a lot of the people say, we've heard this so many times before. People come here, they promise you the earth, and no one ever delivers. And one of the things that Kerry always says is that we never promise something that we can't deliver. So in the beginning, it was simply, I'll see you next month.
I'll pitch up. I think that was very clear in your story there, Kerry. Yeah.
And we've tried to keep that ethos all the way, to not overpromise, because these people are promised and disappointed all of the time.
So on this LGBT issue, I think recently you guys were involved with the Pride Pride celebrations here in Cape Town. Maybe you want to talk about that?
We decided, because we are an organisation dealing with a real diverse range of human beings, hugely partly the gay, lesbian, trans community. And so it's really important that we showed a presence at Pride for those that didn't have anyone to walk with, for those that didn't have any family there or any kind of support, to actually just really show up, because ultimately Super Troopers is about showing up for each other. And so we had a presence there, and we marched together, and homeless people along the way some joined us to walk with us, and some along the way felt like, they were just on the sides, and we invited them into our space. And I feel that is a really crucial, important aspect, and just important for us to stand up and stand together and create these spaces for anyone to just feel like they have a space. Because when you're walking around and you're lonely and you're going through all the trauma and all the rejection that you're going through, where to from there as a human being? So I think it was just important from a Pride perspective. And Karen may, there are a lot about while we were standing up and creating a space for people that had nowhere to go.
I mean, I think we took issue with the fact that entrance to the carnival was 50 Rand. So already that excludes a massive percentage of our population. We deal with so many gay and particularly trans people on the streets, and they are so vulnerable.
they can't go to shelters because shelters won't admit them, and they make a big fuss of, are you a man, are you a woman, which toilet can you use, no, we don't want you in our, the men don't want you, the women don't want you. So that is why there is such a large trans population on the streets.
Where to from here, Kerry? What's some of your thinking, and where to from here for Super Troopers?
So it became very clear in this 6 years at our once a month socials that were the catalyst to understanding who are our beneficiaries, what do they need, where can they go anywhere. And so our once a month socials have been put on pause because ultimately the social was just the catalyst to connect and to understand what the problem is and if and what is the solution, and can we, while we're not aiming to solve this, what can we do to alleviate and impact change. And so our once a month socials have turned into understanding that we're needing our venue, our own space, which we're calling a human hub. And it is literally that. It is a hub for human beings. First and foremost, it's the first port of call for anyone, on the street or not, but a human and predominantly homeless people, to come and re-dignify themselves, restore dignity through the basic human needs of shower, clothes, toiletries, something to eat, feel like a human. Then enroll into our Super Troopers system and a membership where ultimately we understand, do you need an ID? Do you have your birth certificate? You certainly don't have a residential address because you're living on the streets. What qualifications do you have? Do you have skills? Do you have passions? Because not everyone that is successful in life has had qualifications or degrees and doesn't need those. So the idea of the human hub is that you come in there, you feel like a human, and then you really find your purpose, and then you get busy being productive. So ultimately it's looking at working from within out. It's having our partnerships and collaborations for us to enable workshops and upskilling and empowering people, which ultimately we're already doing these things out of the park or out of coffee shops, out of our car, out of the troops' homes on the streets. We're doing so much already that our venue and our human hub would be able to facilitate all of that in a more sustainable and scalable aspect. But that this human hub is that one-stop wonder where a trooper, instead of spending their days or their weeks just basically surviving, where they're going to eat, where they're going if they're sick, where are they going, and how much time are they spending just surviving. If they're coming to our Super Troopers Human Hub, we could literally address those first initial things that we address quite easily, and with the help of many more coming onto our team, we'd be able to facilitate that. And then ultimately, our intention is to employ our beneficiaries and help them reintegrate into society, providing spaces like through our supermarket, or even through, we've got a supermarket, we've got the super salon, super cafe, a super style outlet. This is a super world, in case you haven't picked that up. But ultimately, this is a new way. This is seeing humans for where they're at and finding space to become productive and purposeful so that they can change their own lives and help others change theirs.
So you're in some ways shifting the focus from the immediate or the monthly to a much longer term.
Absolutely. More
sustainable.
Absolutely.
And building those things that, again, we take for granted, the ID, your documentation. If that's not in order, how do you function as a citizen within any space here in South Africa? It's very, very difficult, I can imagine.
And the beauty of Super Troopers is in its authenticity of its evolvingness, and the evolving, every time we moved out the company gardens or the service dining room or the carpenter shop, and what we're doing and focusing on now, we're evolving because we've got something is working. We've got troopers, whether we're not addressing troopers every day, hundreds, because we're literally at our full capacity and we don't have a venue. We know that when we open doors, we know the kind of people that we will attract. And this is for only those that do want the help, because Super Troopers is not that handout. It's not, it's moved from that once a month social into people respecting and understanding that we are here to impact, if you would like that.
It's providing a particular service,
yes,
particular offering, and you subscribe or not.
Yes.
Where to from here, Karen? Where can people find out more about the work that you're doing? I'm sure there's some sort of web-based platform and social media that you're using. Where physically will people find you?
We have a website, Super Troopers, SOUPERTROOPERS.org. We have a Facebook page, we have an Instagram account. We're active on all of those. And we also, something that we haven't actually mentioned, is one of the ways in which we're helping troops get productive is through our supermarket. We have, at the moment, 2 troops who are creating beautiful Dignity, Love, Respect bracelets and Super Troopers bracelets. And we've been gifted a weekend stand at the OZCF market at the Granger Bay.
Fantastic.
Which we'll be there next weekend, the middle of March, and probably the middle of every month after that. So people can come, meet the troops, meet us, say hello, see our products, and support us that way.
And I think this is a crucial example of what you were saying, is that when you don't make any promises, you really, really see how much more you can achieve when, without setting yourself up for these massive dreams. You take one step towards the dream and the dream is happening.
The incrementalism.
We are
day by day,
and that's really the magic of Super Troopers. The fun about it, the love, is that there are troops out there that are feeling hopeful, and for them to feel hopeful in a very hopeless situation provides us with hope to continue.
The whole question of sponsorship, of getting involved. If there's one of the listeners out there who's saying, "Look, I really want to get involved, but I don't have the time," and maybe it's more of a contribution. Is there an opportunity, a platform that people can assist?
I want people to know that Super Troopers is the opportunity to really step up in the ways that you can, to do the little things, any little things, to know that Super Troopers is a community built on little things. For us, we're looking for partnerships, for people to collaborate with us, to take us on as their own and show up in ways that they can, from corporates to providing product, to providing services. We need help. We are predominantly 2 people with a very solid foundation of a board, and we've got a strong foundation to support the moving forward. But anyone that really can help us and come on board with us, know that this is as much an opportunity for you as it is for making a difference in our world.
If we flip that coin and say there's somebody listening who's representing a homeowners association, residents association, who have you started with it, I think, Karen, saying this is a problem, it's a challenge, and we don't know how to deal with it. Are they welcome to approach you to discuss ways of looking at this?
Absolutely. We are very open-minded people. We are here and we are very clear in what we need and where we need to go. Anyone that ultimately, we are looking for people that want that social reward, philanthropists, people that can help us. We know we need our venue. We know we need funding, which is ultimately what many organizations need. What we're offering is that opportunity to make some tangible differences to thousands of people that are just lost and have no hope, where we are providing enormous amount of hope.
Well, you've certainly provided a perspective today. I've learned a lot. In terms of some of the terminology you've used, in terms of the thinking and the idea of not all things need to be big in scale, but they can be upscaled, and you can keep going and keep demonstrating. And I certainly appreciate the 2 of you, Kerry, Karen, for the time that you've given. I really hope our listeners take a lot of value from this. You've made it very clear where they can find you. Many thanks. Thank you for your time. All the very best, and we look forward to speaking to you in due course.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Talking Transformation podcast. Please engage with us and let us know your thoughts on this episode. You can do so via the Anchor podcast platform. There's a voice message function available via the app. You can also follow us on Twitter via Talking Transfo and the number 1. So Talking Transfo 1. Our theme music is kindly made available by Tribal Need. Find out about the music, the street art shows here in Cape Town and Europe via tribalneed.co.za. neighbourhood.com.